Thank you, everyone, for coming today. Are there any announcements that anybody would like to share about upcoming events?
March tomorrow.
Yes, of course, the March for Our Lives. So that's a big one. So, okay, so in San Jose it starts at 11 and goes until 2. It starts at San Jose City Hall, and we hope it will be successful.
Yes, I have an announcement.
Okay.
On Saturday, the 20th of April, there's going to be a rally for Mumia Abu Jamal, who's a political prisoner here in the United States. And it's going to be at the Martin Luther King Library on 4th and San Fernando, around 11 o'clock. But I'll have something on the calendar, so please check the calendar for the information about it.
John.
This coming Friday, a week from tonight, would be a women's panel here with 4 panelists, young new voices of the women's movement, and it should be an interesting exchange. I invite all of you to come.
Will that be after the Good Friday March?
It'll be at 7 o'clock.
If somebody knows something about a Good Friday March, can you announce it?
Yes, please share.
All I understand is that the downtown churchers are going to be meeting, with this group, I thought, at 5 o'clock on Friday at the library to...
They're joining the Friday Peace Vigil, in other words. Yeah.
But there's a march involved to go through part of downtown.
Tell them to give us a call so we can publicize it. I guess Jennifer would know, from St. Paul's.
Yes, she certainly would.
Yeah.
Or Renee Rico at First Methodist.
Okay, very good. So I am Sharat Lin, and I'm going to be speaking today about the Kurds in the eye of the storm. And the reason that I've titled it that is because the Kurds are well, first of all, the Kurds are a nationality, a group of people who do not have a country, and they live mainly in 4 countries, so they live, and I'll show you a map, but they live mainly in Turkey, in Syria, in Iraq, and Iran, and there are smaller populations of them in Azerbaijan and Armenia. And they have always longed to be united as a people, but they've always been divided by these borders. And some of these borders, of course, were created by colonialism after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. And so these kinds of borders are in many ways artificial. Now as a minority and they are a minority in all of the countries in which they live, they have suffered from repression by each and every one of the governments that we're talking about, and so they have had struggles for autonomy and self-determination at least since the late 70s, and so there are a lot of questions about why is it that today some of the Kurds, some of the Kurdish movements or political parties are now collaborating with imperialism. Some of them are even collaborating with Israel. So it raises a lot of questions about what's going on here. So I thought it's time to get a little bit of background about the Kurds, about what's happening, a little bit about their history. And I'm not an expert. I'm doing this. This is my first talk on this, and I found out that as I was putting this together, that I have a lot more material that I can't possibly put into this talk. So this is just kind of a sampling for now of my travels, plus some background in the Kurdish region. And I've been to the Kurdish regions in those 4 main countries, so in Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. And I have not seen very much, but what I have seen still is a lot to share. Okay, so first of all, the image that is on the flyer is this one. And so it's a sort of an artistic creation, but the image actually comes from a funeral. And this funeral was actually quite unprecedented because this is taking place in Turkey, and ever since the end of the Ottoman Empire with Kemalism, with the father of the current Turkish Republic, Kemal Atatürk, there are several things that he started. So one was he asserted secularism. He wanted to move Turkey towards the West, and so he, for example, started the process of Romanization of the Turkish language. The Turkish used to be written in the Arabic script, and by Romanizing it, he hoped that it would connect Turkey to Europe. And now, of course, the downside of that, one of the big downsides of that, is that what it does is because Turks today, if they are not Muslims and they're not very religious, they most likely are not going to even learn the Arabic script. And so this disconnects Turks today and everybody who lives in Turkey from their linguistic heritage. So they can't read the old texts. Anyway, so this is taking place, this photograph is from Diyarbakir. So Diyarbakir is in the southeast of Turkey, and that is the area where the Kurds are primarily concentrated. And then they're also a little bit up to the northeast of this. There's a concentration of Armenians, what's left of them after the Armenian genocide. And so one of the things that Kemal Atatürk did is he wanted Turkey to be a completely Turkish country. He wanted everyone in Turkey who lived and became and was a citizen there to identify as Turkish. And so Armenians and Kurds were problematic because they did not identify primarily as Turkish. And in the case of Kurds, it was possible for Kurds as Muslims to, if they chose to identify as Turks and maybe Turkify their names, that they could sort of blend in to the Turkish society, right? And so the only Kurds that Kemalism had a problem with were those who refused to relinquish their Kurdish identity, who refused to relinquish their Kurdish language. Because one of the things is that the Kurdish language was banned. Kurdish newspapers were all closed down. Now, for the Armenians, it was even worse because Armenians as Christians could not simply blend in. And so that for that reason there was this genocide, was that if they cannot be blended in, then eliminate them. So that is one of the great tragedies of early Turkish history. I mean, I'm talking about post-Ottoman Turkish history. So this funeral is of some fighters. These are PKK fighters, so I'll talk about these armed groups that the Kurds have, and these are Kurdish fighters who reside in Turkey. They are Turkish Kurds who have been going and fighting ISIS by crossing the border into Syria and fighting ISIS and joining with their Kurdish fighters in Syria in this battle against ISIS. And the reason that this funeral was quite significant is because any kind of a funeral of this type done publicly would have been prohibited before the peace agreement between the Turkish government and the Kurds that took place in 2013. And that agreement lasted for only 2 years. And I was there during that window of peace when I saw a number of very unusual things. And I saw, open displays of Armenian identity that could never have happened before that sort of window of democracy. So the Kurds are people who live in the orange area. And you see here that you've got Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran, a little bit of Armenia and Azerbaijan. So Kurds live in these areas, and the largest number of Kurds are in Turkey. So there are about 25 million Kurds, and of course the exact number is not really known because it depends on who identifies as Kurdish. And probably the second largest population of Kurds is in Iraq, and then Syria and Iran have smaller numbers, and then a few thousands in Armenia and Azerbaijan. So it's a more or less contiguous area, although there are some spots that are non-contiguous. There's even one spot of Kurds living all the way out by near to Mashhad, which is in northeastern Iran. But this is the main population. And the wars that have taken place in the past few decades have surrounded the Kurds, right? So we have the Turkish government battling the Kurds, trying to repress them in this area. We have the civil war, and then the battle against ISIS in Syria. We have the two Gulf wars that were launched by the United States against Iraq, and so those wars engulfed the Kurds in various ways. And in Iran, the Kurds in Iran are the only ones to have formed an independent republic at one time. It was very short-lived, but it was called the Mahabad Republic. And Mahabad is up there in that northwestern corner of Iran. And but since then, probably the most peaceful place for Kurds has actually been in Iran. Their human rights have been more or less respected. There's some repression, there's discrimination, but their situation has been relatively stable in Iran, both under the Shah as well as under the Islamic Republic. So that's sort of a high-level overview. Now this also shows some of the geography, and you see the mountains are so the one way that Kemalism tried to integrate Kurds into the Turkish identity was by relabeling them instead of as Kurds, to relabel them as Mountain Turks. And you see that the Kurdish area is largely mountainous, right? It's largely mountainous, and these mountains go from Turkey down through Iraq, down through Iran. And the only place that's in the Kurdish area that is relatively flat is this border area between Turkey and Syria. And this is why it's possible for Kurdish fighters to move relatively freely between Turkey and Syria. And so what we find is that there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of similarity between the Turkish political and armed movements in Turkey and in Syria, and less so between Turkey and Syria versus Iraq and Iran. Okay, now there's you will, in reading about Kurds, if you've done that, you will find that there's quite what I call an alphabet soup of organizations, and these are just the main ones. There are lots of smaller ones, and they have these for the most part 3-letter acronyms, and some of these like the PKK, which is the Kurdistan Workers' Party, and this is a group that the Turkish government considers to be a terrorist organization. And because of the U.S. alliance with Turkey, the U.S. government has also classified the PKK as a terrorist organization, according to the State Department. And its military arm is the HGP. So these are the fighters that are affiliated with the PKK. There's also an electoral party that is primarily Kurdish in the sense that 90% of the membership of the HDP, which is the People's Democratic Party, is actually Kurds, and it's a left party. It's a left party. In fact, all the organizations that are in this picture are left in some sense, in the sense that they have declared support for socialism, they have declared opposition to imperialism. So these are in their charters of every one of these organizations. So the HDP is a recent party formation in Turkey that has been contesting elections in the national parliament, and was a small party of not of less than 10% of the seats in the Turkish parliament until the 2015 election. In 2015, the HDP won about something like 19% of the seats in the parliament, and what that did is it prevented the ruling party, the AKP, the ruling party of Tayyip Recep Erdogan, from having full control of the national parliament. So that enraged Erdogan, and he broke the ceasefire, the peace agreement with the Kurds, and started bombing the Kurds again, because he said that we cannot allow the Kurds to have political power. So let's again try to crush them. Okay, so let's go to Syria. So in Syria, the main Kurdish political party is the PYD, or the Democratic Union Party, and it has affiliations. It communicates. It has a lot of connections to the PKK. Now the United States has Turkey considers it to be a terrorist group. The State Department in the U.S. has recently removed it from the list of terrorist groups. The reason for that is because the U.S. government had decided that the only ally that can viably fight ISIS and win is the PYD with its two military arms. Okay, the YPG and the YPJ. Okay, so the YPG is the People's Protection Units. So this is the militia of the PYD. It works in close connection with the HDP, all right, in Turkey. It has a subgroup, the YPJ, which is the women's army. So this is the women's militia, all right? And so both of these have been, the State Department has lifted the classification of terrorist groups from them in order to supply them with arms. Otherwise, the U.S. law would prevent the U.S. government to supply them arms or to give them logistical support. Now, so let's look at Iraq. So the two main political parties there are the PDK, or sometimes it's written as KDP. If you write it in English, it stands for the Kurdistan Democratic Party. It is led by it was founded by Mustafa Barzani, and so these are the two big names in Kurdish politics in Iraq: Barzani and Talabani. So Jalal Talabani was the founder of the PUK, or the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan. And these two parties, the interesting thing about these two parties is that they have their own separate geographical bases of support. Okay, I'll show you the map, and we'll get a little more into that. Two political parties, each with their own geographic areas of support. And then in Iran, there is a Democratic Party of Iranian Kurdistan, and I don't know very much about it, but it shows that in Iran there is an allowance for them to operate as long as they are not a serious contender for political power. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to give a little bit of background about how the Kurds have been in the eye of the storm of war. And so first, as I mentioned, the governments in Turkey and in Iraq have from time to time conducted armed attacks against Kurds within their own borders. And in the case of Turkey, this process accelerated in the 1980s through the 1990s to the point where something like 30,000 Kurds have been killed over the years inside Turkey due to attacks by the Turkish government. In the case of Iraq, it has been more sporadic and accelerated during the Iran-Iraq War. So Iran-Iraq War runs from 1980 to 1988, and it is what was happening was that there were times during the Iran-Iraq War when Saddam Hussein feared that he would actually lose the war, and he was being backed by Saudi Arabia and the United States, because even though the United States was officially neutral, the internal documents of the National Security Council, which I have looked at in the presidential libraries, indicate that the U.S. was very concerned that Iran not win the Iran-Iraq War. They wanted Saddam Hussein to win, even though they were not exactly totally in favor of him, but he was not being demonized at that point in time. So the big campaign against the Kurds was called the Anfal campaign, which took place in the year 1988, the last year of the Iran-Iraq War. And there were 9 Anfal campaigns, and the purpose of the Anfal campaigns was to depopulate Kurdish villages along the Iranian border. So it had to do with the Iran-Iraq War. Now, there was another battle that took place, and this is more famous. This is the Battle of Halabja. Actually, it was not the battle, but it was the bombardment, the chemical weapons attack on the Kurdish town of Halabja. So Halabja is this town here, and that red line is the Iranian border. And this took place on March 16th of 1988. The Iraqi Air Force dropped a variety of chemical weapons right on the town. And I just want to very quickly review what happened. So this is an interesting photograph, because, and this is from Iranian sources, and apparently the attack against Halabja was also an attack during the Iran-Iraq War, because apparently the Pasdaran had actually entered Halabja the day before, and so that was the sort of the trigger for Saddam Hussein to drop the chemical weapons. It doesn't justify the chemical weapons, but that was the tactical situation on the ground. So these are some of the bombardments of Halabja on the 16th of March 1988. Yes. In fact, we are just 1 week past the 30th anniversary of this, and so afterwards, then the Iranians evacuated the wounded, took them to hospitals in many places in Iran. And this is from a film. This is from a film, Takht Siyah, which means the blackboards, but it's sort of a reenactment of the Kurds fleeing Halabja. So they had to flee into to go to Iran. They had to climb up into the mountains to do that. And this is just a film reenactment. And then these are some of the refugee camps that were in Iran, where the fleeing Kurds stayed. So this is just a memo from the National Security Council, a sample indicating that there was grave concern that Saddam Hussein would lose the war, and we couldn't allow that. Now, This is a flyer, a leaflet that was created by the State Department to talk about the chemical weapons attack in Halabja. Okay, so there was concern that Saddam Hussein was using chemical weapons and that it killed 5,000 of his own people. The problem is that this memo was not issued in 1988. It was issued in 2003. It was issued in 2003 because suddenly the U.S. government needed a pretext for invading Iraq. Okay, and so that is in fact what happened. And then on March 16th, there was the summit on the Azores Islands, where Tony Blair and George Bush II met and gave the final ultimatum to Saddam Hussein that we're going to attack. And so after the chemical weapons bombing, there was a museum was built, and this is the Halabja Museum. So the Halabja Museum had exhibits about the deaths, about the tragedy of Halabja 1988, and the residents, however, of the town of Halabja thought that, well, okay, if everybody is so sympathetic and all these VIPs, the UN Secretary General, Colin Powell, all coming to visit the Halabja Museum, then why don't they help rebuild our town? Why don't they help us recover? And there was very little aid. There was very little changed, and so frustrated residents of Halabja, on the anniversary celebration of the or not celebration, but the anniversary of the Halabja massacre, they decided to burn there was a protest, and they burnt the police fired, and they set fire to the museum. And this is the museum today. So I visited the Halabja Museum in 2017, and inside, I don't need to repeat, but it has these kinds of exhibits, both photographs as well as recreations of the aftermath of the chemical weapons attack. Okay. Another thing that is in Halabja is a huge cemetery of many of the people who died in that chemical weapons attack. Now what I'm going to do is shift to just sort of a little bit of background, because I know that many people know very little about the Kurds, and so I just want to just show you a few pictures of Kurds, Kurdish society, and Kurdish people. So these are women in Halabja dressed in, they don't normally dress this way, but this is a ceremony, a festival, and so they're dressed up in traditional Kurdish attire. Here's an old woman in her home, and we were just having a conversation about Turkish bombing in her village. And okay, so now what we have here is this is a map of, I'm shifting to, well, we're still in Iraq, and the solid red line is the officially recognized boundary of Iraqi Kurdistan. Okay, so and that is the line that the government in Baghdad recognizes. However, this dashed red line is the area that is under the effective control, was under the effective control of the Kurdish regional government. So the government of Iraqi Kurdistan has some autonomy, and it has that autonomy because, beginning with the no-fly zones that were established by the U.S. and its coalition during and after the first Gulf War, right? And so those no-fly zones gave this region some measure of autonomy and allowed the Kurdish regional government to be established and to begin the rebuilding process. Now, the other thing is that there are two big cities here, other than the ones that are in the Kurdish region. The other big cities are Dohuk, Erbil, and this is something very interesting because in every reference to the capital city of Iraqi Kurdistan, we read in the West Erbil, whether it's ARBIL or ERBIL or IRBIL, it's Erbil, right? And when you go to Iraqi Kurdistan, you'll find out that the Kurdish name is Hawler. And so this sort of illustrated to me, the problem of an oppressed minority, where everybody else who's drawing the maps is using the Western name, or even the Arabic name is Erbil, right? But none of these other external powers or peoples use the actual Kurdish name for the city. Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, right. So, and then Suleymaniya is another large city, and then there are these two that are outside the formal boundary, Mosul and Kirkuk. And Mosul has had a population that is roughly half Kurdish. So the KRG had some claim on it. And then Kirkuk is actually a majority Kurdish. And actually there's been a sort of a population war here. So when Saddam Hussein was in power, what he would try to do is he would try to forcibly move Kurds out of Kirkuk so that he could claim it as an Arab city, as a Sunni Arab city. And the strategic significance of these two cities, Kirkuk and Mosul, is that not only are they the largest in the north, but they also have oil fields. Okay, so this is where the oil is, and there's nothing on that map. But anyway, so this purple region was under the control of the KRG, Kurdish Regional Government, and these cities, Mosul and Kirkuk, are in that region. They're not part of the formal Kurdish region. Now, to move around the Kurdish Iraqi Kurdistan, one has to go through military checkpoints, and so these are under the control of the Kurdish police. And once again, everything in Iraqi Kurdistan is divided between these two major political parties that control geographic regions. So let's go back to this map. So the PDK, the Barzani group, controls this part. Okay, and they have, overwhelming support, political support, in this part of the region. The Talabani group, or the PUK, controls this part. So when you cross this border between here and here, you're going very distinctly from a PUK checkpoint with its own flag to a PDK checkpoint with its flag. It's like going from one country to another. And that's what these checkpoints are. And then, of course, there are also internal checkpoints. This is an internal checkpoint. The Barzani group is the one that supported the referendum for independence. Now, this was not in my view, particularly when we look at it in historical retrospect, we realize that the referendum was not a genuine move towards independence. It was a political ploy. It was a political ploy to consolidate political support for the son of the original founder. His son is also Barzani, Masoud Barzani. And so this referendum was done, and it was basically it's advisory. But the end result of the referendum was something like a 90% vote in the Barzani area, 92% vote in favor of the referendum. So it was a way for him to sort of rally support behind his political party and his leadership. the support in the Talabani group, okay, in that area, there was also opposition. There was a what was called the No for Now movement, which said that we want independence, but we don't want the referendum now, because it will create problems, and so the support in the Barzani area, the Talabani area was still in favor, but much less. So something like, I don't know, 70% or so. And the response from the government in Baghdad, of course, was to clamp down, to send its troops into the contested area, that purple region, to take back control of Kirkuk and Mosul from the Kurdish regional government, and also to take control of the airports. So before they did that, okay, if you ask the government in Baghdad, okay, do I need a visa? The answer is yes, you need a visa. But you didn't need a visa to go into the Kurdish region, because the airports were under the control of the Kurdish regional government, which didn't require visas. Right. Now that's changed. Okay, so this is another referendum poster. It's just a flag of the PDK with Masoud Barzani. So this just gives you some idea of some of the towns. This is the town of Amedi. So this is in the northwest of the region. It's very mountainous. So most of the Kurdish region of Iraq is mountainous, and you see houses built in some amazingly steep places. Very scenic. Okay, so this is the oil map. So you can see how the oil field, this really long one, runs right through Kirkuk, and then there are others just right around Mosul. So this is very hotly contested area. These are so that one round. So most of the oil production in Iraqi Kurdistan is that big one that goes through Kirkuk, but there are others that are under exploration. You can, I will actually show you. Let me see. Yes, so this is an aerial view of Howler, and you see these bright spots. So each one of these bright spots is a gas flare. So there's active production all around Howler, as well as around Mosul and around this in fact is Mosul, and so you see bright spots. So those are flares out in the distance, south of Mosul. This was just after. This was within months after Mosul was recaptured from ISIS. And this is the flaring. So there's a lot of flaring that is going on here. Iraq, along with Nigeria, these are among the two countries that do the most natural gas flaring. And the reason for the flaring is because what they're doing is that they're extracting crude oil, and they don't have the facilities to capture the natural gas and store it. That's the problem. But it's just a matter of investing in it and making it a priority. Okay, now as war goes on around the Kurdish region, one of the things that I must congratulate the Kurds for is that they have protected the minorities within their region of control. Okay, and so one of those minorities are the Yazidis. And if you remember a few years ago that ISIS massacred thousands of Yazidis and raped their women in the town of Sinjar. So Sinjar is almost to the Syrian border. And now within Iraqi Kurdistan, you see that these are Yazidis who have come to build their temples, because now they have been displaced. They were displaced from Sinjar, and they're trying to reestablish themselves in a safe zone within Iraqi Kurdistan. And so this is the typical style of a Yazidi temple.
Were some of them Christian?
No, they're different. I'll show them to you, and you can judge for yourself. I mean, they don't act like Muslims. I mean, the women are not covered, and but they're completely different from and their religious practice, as I'll show you, their practices are completely different from both Islam as well as Christianity.
So that's why they were a target of ISIS.
Of ISIS, yeah, just because they're different. They don't conform to any pattern that ISIS could tolerate. So this is the main Yazidi temple. It's located in Lalesh, and it's in a hilly region, and these are Yazidis. What they're doing here is they're building some new facilities in the temple complex, and this fellow, I suppose, is a temple priest, and these are people who are just giving us a tour of the Lalesh temple, and these are two Yazidi. These are college students. One of them is hoping to go to medical school, and you can see they're very modern. They're of modern dress, and very open. And this is okay. I thought I had. Maybe I didn't load those slides. Okay, it seems I didn't load those slides for the temple. But the temple is very interesting. It's got a bunch of rooms, and there are these cloths that are, I suppose, that are sacred cloths, and people go and they rearrange the cloths, and that's just a sacred ceremony, like a prayer that you do. So it's not cloth. No, cloth. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And then so another big feature of their rituals is use of oil lamps. So there's a lot of oil that is used for the oil lamps. That's right. That's what I thought of. Yes. And then there is a relationship. There is a relationship between Zoroastrianism and the Yazidis that goes way back thousands of years ago. And another community that has been oppressed by ISIS are the Christians, or the Assyrian Christians of northern Iraq. And so this is a town of Kashkawa. It consists mostly of Christian refugees from other parts of Iraq, and so when their towns were taken over by ISIS, they had to flee, and the place that they chose to flee to was Iraqi Kurdistan. They felt that Iraqi Kurdistan was a safer place than other parts of Iraq, and so far the Kurdish regional government has kept its promise and has protected them, allowed them to practice their culture in any way that they wish, and to speak their language, to practice their religion. This is an Assyrian church, and many of these people are from Mosul, and because Mosul had a large Assyrian population before ISIS. Now this is another thing. So which is curious at first. So the Turkish government has been periodically bombing Iraqi Kurdistan, and the reason that Turkish government is doing this, the reason that they give, is because there are PKK. They allege that there are PKK fighters from Turkey who are operating or taking refuge in Iraqi Kurdistan. what we have here is members of a Kurdish family, showing us some of the bomb fragments that they found after the Turkish bombing. The other thing that we discovered is that there are actually Turkish military bases. There's actually a full Turkish military base, an Air Force base, located inside the Iraqi border, in Iraqi Kurdistan. And the best explanation I can give for that is it goes back to the original question that I posed at the beginning of the talk, which is, why is it that some of the Kurdish parties are choosing to collaborate with their natural enemies, right? So imperialism is one. The other one is the Turkish government that is brutally repressing Kurds inside Turkey. And the best answer I can give is this: that in all cases, the Kurdish political parties in all regions is fighting a desperate struggle for self-determination. And so what they're looking for is any kind of a tactical ally that they can use as a counterweight against the ruling government within that country. So in the case of Iraq, you have basically a Shia government in Baghdad, or a Shia-dominated government in Baghdad, that will not represent their interests. And so they need, in some way, the Turkish presence, and even in this case a military presence, as a counterweight to Baghdad. I mean, if you have a Turkish military base there, that is also a deterrent from Baghdad actually sending troops into the Kurdish regional, the formal region, and because then you would have a clash between Iraqi troops and Turkish troops. I think that's the best explanation I can come up with. Now, this is a bomb crater. I'm standing in a bomb crater. So this bomb crater was from a bomb that was dropped by the Turkish Air Force. Now, all of this fighting around also creates refugees. So this is an IDP camp, which is an internally displaced persons camp. And it's all the way to the south, near to Halabja, and it's there is United Nations support for these camps, and in talking to these boys, we found out that many of them come from Tikrit and areas to the south that had come under control of ISIS and then were liberated. And after liberation, the question is, why don't they go back? And the reason that they told us is that because the Shia militias that have recaptured Tikrit from ISIS do not trust them. They think that, okay, you're Sunni, so you could be ISIS in hiding. So they won't let them back into their homes. So this is the ongoing tragedy in Iraq. You're just, telling more of their stories. And okay, so now I'm coming back to Turkey. Coming back to Diyarbakir. Diyarbakir is the largest city. It's kind of thought of as the capital of Turkish Kurdistan. It has a population of about 2 million. And what you see is that wherever you look, you see that this is in the heartland of Kurdish territory in Turkey, and yet everything is in Turkish, right? So every word here is in Turkish. This is just a street in Diyarbakir, just to give you a sense of the city. This is the old wall. So this is the old city wall. This is the only old city wall in the world that is complete. It goes all the way around without any gaps. Yeah, in the old, because all other old city walls have crumbled in some places or have been demolished. They're incomplete. just to show you some people. She's stuffing a pillow, I think. Yeah, some kind of, no, I'm not sure. Some kind of cotton, yeah, looks like cotton. Fruit vendor, yeah. Kebab, tailor, yeah, bakery. See, this is the Kurdish style of bread. It's unique. And this is a university. This is actually an English class at the Dicle University. Means that the Tigris University, because the Tigris River runs through Diyarbakir. So sometimes you see, despite the ban, despite the repression, the symbols or the writing of the Kurdish political parties. In this case, the PKK. This is on the old city wall. Now this was during. You see Kurdish language here, and the reason for that, of course, is this was that 2-year window, the peace agreement from 2013 to 2015, and so this was possible in some limited ways. And even a poster in Kurdish. But the Diyarbakir is a highly militarized zone because of the military repression in the Kurdish region. So there are a lot of Turkish military bases in the area. Now, one of the delightful things that I did was to visit this Kurdish village, and so it's right from the sign. It's illustrative. So Ortaşehir is the Turkish name. Okay, and Elwendi is the Kurdish name. So if you look on a Kurdish map, you will only see Ortaşehir, but the people in the village know it as Elwendi. And what we did is we went there to show a film, and a lot of these people who are those who do not very frequently go to a city, some of them, especially the kids, have never seen a film before. So what we're doing was this is part of the labor festival, May 1st Labor Festival in Turkey, and we're there to show a film, and this particular film is about Turkish military repression of the Kurds. So it was something that they could identify with. So anyway, you see the kids watching the film, and you can see the expressions on their faces. It's really amazing. They were just glued to the screen. And this is after the film. And a really great view of the women. Yeah. And then what happens after that, and they do this typically after every gathering, every public gathering, is break into dancing. So this is a Kurdish folk dance. It's not required. You see, here's a man and a woman. So it's not required. They tend to group, but there also are places where men and women are joined. And then the younger women, the girls, are the T-shirts, right? yeah. There are a lot of T-shirts with English on them, right? Yeah. Okay, so finally, my last part is I'll talk a little bit about Kurds in Syria, and I actually have not visited the Kurdish areas in Syria. Although I have been to Syria, but the three areas of interest, and there are other areas where Kurds live within Syria, but these are the areas which are part of Rojava. So Rojava is the areas that are under the control of the Kurdish political party, and where the the YPG and YPJ units operate. So this was the situation in 2014. The what was preventing, what makes this part green is the fact that ISIS was there back in 2014. All right, and so the alliance between the West and the Kurdish militias enabled the defeat of ISIS. And what happened then was that the Kurds took control of the ISIS territory. And what's happening in this Kurdish region is now this is in 2013. So when the ISIS was kicked out of Raqqa, all right, this is a statue of Hafiz al-Assad that was toppled, and you may have seen this photo in the news, but the Western reporters had no idea that, because they couldn't read this, and this is Kurdish, so that means that this statue, at least it's an indication that probably Kurdish fighters were the ones who were responsible for toppling the statue. And this is the YPJ, the women's militia in Kurdistan of Syria, and these are all female units, and there are also other units that are integrated where you have men and women fighting together. And so one of the things that has happened in both Turkey and Syria, as I mentioned earlier, there's more commonality between Kurds in Turkey and Syria because it's not mountains, because they can almost freely go between these two countries. And so there is a concept of women taking an equal place along with men, not just in words, but actually in deeds. So in fighting, so in two critical areas, fighting and in leadership. And so you have these women fighters, and I showed you that funeral picture earlier, right? That sarcophagus was being carried by women. So the tradition is that among Kurds is that when a woman dies, the coffin is carried by women, and when a man dies, it's carried by men. So that was a woman fighter, and so in both areas, women play a very important and very equal role. And so the other photo I wanted to show is the political leaders. So there was at the funeral in Diyarbakir, there were two Kurdish politicians who came to speak, and both of them were women. But it's more than just promoting women into positions of leadership. So what the HDP as well as the PKK, okay, so both of these political parties, both the electoral political party as well as the liberation political party, as well as the political party in Syria, have this rule that whenever they put someone up for a leadership position, or they put up a candidate for electoral office, they will always put up two candidates. It's a concept of co-leadership. And so one man, one woman will always share the co-leadership. Okay? So this is a revolutionary and unique innovation, and they practice it. That's the important thing. So there's a lot more to talk about, and a lot more that I didn't have time to show. But so it's a very interesting situation that's happening here. It's both positive as well as some negative aspects of how the Kurds are divided. I mean, they're divided. They're becoming divided in a sense linguistically, because in Turkey their language was Romanized, and so some of the Syrian Kurds have learned the Romanized Kurdish just because of the communication between those two. But in Iraq and Iran, they don't. and so there's now a barrier in linguistics for at least in written Kurdish for communication between Turkey and Syria on one hand and Iran, Iraq on the other. Some other interesting facts that I found absolutely fascinating, and this had to do with the fact that the leaders of all these Kurdish political parties were leftists. They were at one time they were more anti-imperialist than they are today, and Mustafa Barzani spent quite a bit of time in exile. So during Saddam Hussein's time, there was tremendous repression. He was in exile in Moscow, and when he came back, he brought with him a word that became the word, because Kurdish did not have a word for thank you, right? So today, if you go there and you want to say thank you say spas, and it's spasiba. So he brought this word spasiba, and it became spas. Okay, thank you. Okay, spas. Okay. Yes.
When you say a word, I usually find that when there's problems between populations, would you say something about the religious affiliations of the various groups that you've discussed? I mean, Iran and the administration of Iraq now are sort of from one group, and then where do these Kurds lie in the religious grouping? And I noticed that even in their own country, that they seem to have a separate. Why would they be divisive amongst themselves in this terms of having this northern part being you have to go through a gate? Why is that?
Okay. Okay. So I guess there are two questions. The first one is what is the religious affiliation of the Kurds, and then the second question is why are there internal divisions within a Kurdish region, and what we're referring to here is Iraq specifically. So on the first point, Kurds identify as Sunni Muslims. So they're almost entirely Sunni Muslims. I mean, there may be some who will convert here and there, but that's minuscule. So they're basically Sunni Muslims. But as I said, one of the beauties of what they have done is that they have never tried to repress another minority that identifies differently, that is under their control. As far as
Just as far as before you get off the
Mm.
there are other Sunni Muslims in Iraq, right, who are not Kurds?
right, yeah. So when you hear talk about the political divisions in Iraq, and of course it's not purely political divisions, but the sectarian divisions within Iraq, there are three main groups that this is talking about. So one are the Shias, who are of course not really completely united, and then so we're talking about Shia Arabs, Sunni Arabs, and Sunni Kurds, and then the smaller minorities, the Assyrians, the Yazidis, and so forth. On the question of why is there a division within Iraqi Kurdistan, and it's because it's because Iraqi Kurdistan historically is tribal, and so the northwest of the region, which is dominated by the PDK and the Barzani group. That happens for a number of reasons, but the original reason is because that is a region that has been historically dominated by the Barzani tribe. And so it's those tribal connections. And that's why in an area which is predominantly populated by people who are either members of the Barzani tribe, who are affiliated or allied to the Barzani tribe, and that's why the political support for that political party is like 99%. Okay, and it's about 1% for the PUK. And then if you go into the Talibani area, again it's tribalism. And so it's those tribes and those families who had a connection, historical connection to Talibani and those people. Yeah, it's funny. This is why it's all tribal. Yeah. 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 And as far as the checkpoints are there, and there are also internal checkpoints within each subregion. And that's because there's ISIS lurking around. There's there may be agents from Baghdad who are snooping around trying to subvert things. And so for them this is still a war zone, even though it's been at relative peace. And so, but that's why there's a lot of security just traveling around within Iraqi Kurdistan. I think Donna had a question.
I don't know if you answered this question, but is the Kurdish language, is it like Arabic? What language is it?
Okay.
No, I mean, or is it more like Farsi? Like what language?
Yeah. Right. So Kurdish is an Indo-European language. So it has some features of Farsi. It has some features of Turkish. So it's within that continuum. Yes. Pete.
It's like Latin. The words it's Latin.
No, it is originally Arabic. It's originally an Arabic script, and so that's why I don't know whether I showed you some of the text. So even though I have written it, so for example, the alphabet soup. So when I wrote the alphabet soup, I put everything into Turkish Kurdish, right? Because the Turkish Kurdish makes more sense in creating the acronyms, right? In fact, that's how they were created. But even then, if for one like me who reads Arabic, it looks really funny to try to read Kurdish, because it's very funny the way that they put things together, and the way that they use the Arabic. The baseline is individual Arabic characters, but the way they're put together is very funny.
Like trying to read Farsi.
Yeah.
No offense.
Sorry.
Population centers, are there any population centers where Kurdish people gather in Europe? I mean,
Yeah.
where?
So there are lots of Kurds in Germany. There are smaller populations in like Italy, probably Belgium. I mean, so they're all over. But the largest concentration is in Germany.
Are they tolerated by the government there? I mean, are they kind of like a government in exile, or?
No, there's no. It's not. There may be some people who are in exile because they would be put in jail if they went back to their home country. So that's certainly true of political parties in Turkey. Okay, so probably they probably would not, at least at this time, there are not very many political refugees from Iraq, but from Turkey, yes, there would be, and so they do have support groups, solidarity groups in Europe, in Britain, in Germany.
They came as refugees.
Well, so the question is whether they came as refugees. and many of them did not. I mean, because refugees is also a very specific definition. It is that people flee a place and then aid agencies recognize them officially as refugees, or the United Nations declares them as refugees, and that qualifies them for aid. It qualifies them to live in a refugee camp. So most of them, they came in different waves, and most of them, like for example, the people who came to Germany, Turks as well as Kurds, came because there were jobs. Yeah, and Germany was open to immigrants fulfilling jobs that were not being filled.
There are also Kurds living in working parts of Israel.
Yeah, but that's a small number.
And in the United States or
Sure. Oh yeah, absolutely, sure. So for example, there's a large Kurdish population in the Detroit area. So it just goes along with the fact that there are a lot of Iraqis who move to Detroit, Houston. Probably have some, as well as the coastal, population centers. Yeah.
What do you see happening currently in Syria in terms of the alliance between our military and the Kurdish fighters, given the pressure being brought to bear by Russia and the Turks?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, are we going to abandon them, or do you have any gut feel for what may happen there?
Actually, I don't, because there's always a huge amount of uncertainty whenever you have what I call triangular alliances. So triangular alliances is that it's not like you have one group here that's fighting another group here, and this one has all kinds of allies, and this one has all kinds of allies. What you have is you've got one group fighting this one, another group out here that's fighting this one and fighting that one. That's a triangular battle. And whenever you have that kind of thing, there are always going to be shifting alliances, because at some point this one that's fighting this one and this one is going to say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't working, so they're going to change sides and try to make it into a bilateral battle. But one thing that isn't going to change is the Turkish government's animosity towards the Kurds, whether it's in Syria or in Turkey. So the question is, where is the U.S. going to stand on this? Is it going to stand with its ally, Turkey, because it's a NATO member, or is it going to, and it depends on whether ISIS, for example, is a continuing threat. It depends upon whether the Kurds might decide that there's a basis for fighting the Syrian government, which the U.S. government wants to change, regime change. So it all depends on how each one of these groups positions itself vis-a-vis the others, and how these triangular battles morph over time, and they will morph. Mm-hmm. Yes, they are. Yeah. She said that the Kurds are being used. Yeah, they're being used by external forces, and the thing is that they are allowing themselves to be used because they are looking for leverage against the possible repression by the governments in the countries in which they live. Okay, I think you have it.
Wasn't there a pretty big splash recently, though, about where the U.S. was coming down?
Mm-hmm.
It sounded like we were getting a foot deeply in there. But the question of the Turks unhappy with the Kurds in Syria.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is now, that's just sort of more the same.
That hasn't changed. So the question is, what I'm not sure I understand it, but it's about the Turkish position vis-a-vis the Kurds in Syria, and that is a position that has not changed. I mean, the Turkish government has always considered the Kurdish militias in Syria to be terrorist organizations. They want them to be crushed. They want any kind of Kurdish movement for identity, for recognition, to be crushed. I mean, they're doing it actively there now because they started actually crossing the border. I mean, aerial bombardment across the border, and even sending ground troops across the Syrian border, right?
Now, were they ostensibly fighting ISIS when they did that?
Well, Turkey has never been clearly fighting ISIS, right? So if Turkey has said that, it is just a smokescreen. And I'll give you several pieces of evidence. So the first is that the arms that have come in to supply ISIS fighters have come across the Turkish border, and those arms are being provided by Turkish traders and Syrian traders. The Turkish government has not done anything to clamp down on that arms trade. Secondly, ISIS, when it had control of the oil fields in Syria, was selling that oil to Syrian traders who would take it to the border. And one of the companies that was buying that oil on the Turkish side was a company that was owned by Erdogan's son. Okay. And the other thing is that the largest number of foreign fighters in ISIS have come from Turkey. The largest number of foreign fighters in ISIS in Syria have come from Turkey. From Turkey. Okay, this is the intelligence, of people who are on the ground in Syria. Their sense is that most of the foreign fighters, or the largest single number of foreign fighters, are coming from Turkey.
Do you have historical insight to how Kurds came to be? In other words, what's their ancient or history in terms of, were they a tribal group that was somewhere, were always that way, or what's their history in terms of
Okay.
wanting to be together?
Okay, so the question is, can I say something about the history of the Kurds, how the Kurdish nationality, came about? And actually, I haven't studied that, so I really can't comment in any detail, other than to say that generally what's happening here, the main historical process is that you have people who migrate. And when they get separated by mountains, their languages evolve, their customs evolve, and so they become differentiated. And so, I mean, this goes all over. And then if you go north of Iran, and then you go into places like Bukhara, and guess what? I heard someone speak Bukhari, and I said, look, this is 90% Farsi, and yet it's not Farsi. So, and it happens because of the formation of nation states and the morphing of those nation states, and these migrations, and then mountain barriers that divide people and force them to evolve separately.
Well, this is supposed to be the largest national group.
Mhm.
Without a homeland, is there any groundswell, for lack of a better term, that countries might decide to yield an area that could be in actual Kurdistan?
Okay, so the question is whether there's any possibility that countries will yield an area, cede an area for the formation of a Kurdistan. Kurdistan means land of the Kurds, and the answer is no. It's an emphatic no. The only place where it is sort of a partial fait accompli is in Iraq, where the Kurdish regional government enjoys a measure of autonomy. Okay, and that again came about. It started because of the no-fly zones, and the possibility of any kind of and the other place, actually there is another place where there is a measure of de facto autonomy, and that's in Syria. Okay, that's in the Rojava areas of eastern Syria. Okay, and the reason for that is because when ISIS occupied that area around Raqqa, it created a ban from the Turkish border all the way south to the oil fields in Syria, and it was a barrier. It was a barrier for the Syrian government to move troops from the west to the east, and so the Kurds in eastern Syria had full autonomy. They were unchallenged, and so it's possible that that could continue, and it remains to be seen how things develop, what happens in that area in between, and whether the Syrian government decides to retake it. I think the Syrian government at the moment has its hands full trying to recapture rebel districts of around Damascus and Aleppo, and so that situation will remain for some time. But so it's possible that that you could have the Kurds could carve out an area of de facto independent nationhood in eastern Syria and later on in northern Iraq. But I think the possibility of that happening in Turkey or Iran is nil at the moment. I guess you haven't asked the question.
I was just going to say that it's a lot more ethnically complicated
Mhm.
too in that area too. So you'd have the Kurds and the Assyrians and others competing for a homeland, wouldn't you?
So the question is whether because of the complexity of the ethnic makeup in these areas that it wouldn't be so simple, because you have Assyrians, we have Yazidis, we have other minorities in these areas, and it's not clear to me that the other minorities feel that they have enough power or population to form their own country. And I don't think there are too many of them who are thinking about that. What they're thinking about is, do we have a safe place to live? Do we have a sanctuary where we can live with respect and safety? And so any way that you divide, draw borders in the Middle East, you're going to be cutting off minority groups. And so there's no alternative to that other than displacement, which is dreadful.
So also Syria does have elected representatives that are in fact Kurdish.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I mean,
Right.
it's part of the government. I think there are two members of the parliament.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, there is some electoral representation, and there's also Kurdish participation in the Syrian Ba'ath Party. Okay, so that doesn't mean that they can control anything,
No,
but
it's
and it's
some acknowledgement.
mhm. Yes.
Well, I want to make a comment to that comment. So just because you have a member in the parliament, oftentimes that is just a token position, much like
Mhm.
Palestinians are members of parliament in one criminal apartheid Israel, but they have no power whatsoever to change the situation for themselves. I did want to say that if you look at the maps of the world over time, depending on who's in power, the lines change, and even the names of the countries change, right? 'Cause
Mm.
way back a long time ago, Iraq was Mesopotamia. And so, who knows what will happen in the future regarding the Kurds. I would say though that, in Iraq and in Syria, at least they can speak their language, they can write their language, they can give their children Kurdish names, whereby in Turkey, there are laws, they can't even speak the language, they can't teach their children even to speak Kurdish, and they can't even name their children Kurdish names. They have to give their children Turkish names.
Mhm. That's correct.
It looks like you got into places that Westerners don't get to. Is that true, and how did you do that?
Okay, so the question is, how did I get into these places where Westerners typically don't go? So one thing that I have not gone into, at least recently, is I have not gone into any battle zones. I just didn't have a safe way of doing that. But the others, it's just a matter of what you have to do is contact some local people who know some of these areas. So, for example, there were some local people who knew about going to Lalesh, to the Yazidi holy sites. Otherwise, I would have no idea about, even if I could locate it on a map. The question is, okay, how do I get there? So this is what we do, and so in every country, I mean, I have some local people who can advise me on whether it's safe to go to this area or that area, and they can give me that kind of guidance. But sure, a lot of it is also a matter of sort of overcoming the fears, because we most Americans think of Iraq and they think, well, it's a battle zone. There's U.S. troops there, and or at least in an advisory capacity, and so they automatically think that it's off limits. You can't go there because there's fighting. And what I know, of course, is that the whole of Iraqi Kurdistan has been free of fighting for some decades. And this is what has enabled the reconstruction. What I didn't show you are photos of the major cities like Hawler, like Soleimani, which have a fair number of high-rise buildings. Here's another contradiction. A lot of that construction, the biggest single foreign investor in Iraqi Kurdistan is Turkey. Yeah. So when it comes to, they can make money. And but it's interesting because you get all kinds of investment, you get all kinds of products from the area. So I would go around every place every building that I go into, I look and see where everything is made. Air conditioners made in Iran, and other appliances from Dubai, and a lot of goods, stoves from Turkey, and they come from every place. China is also there. Sure, there's there will be imports from China everywhere.
Yeah, I'm interested a little more in the economic development of the Kurdistan areas.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, the oil fields,
Mm-hmm.
how they're exploiting that
Mm-hmm.
for their economic development, and how that ties in with the relationship to the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the oil fields, and so I suppose that you would probably be primarily focused on Iraq, because that's where the main oil fields in the Kurdish region are. So right now there are some oil fields in Syria, but they're very small, that the Kurds control. So the main ones certainly are in Iraq, and those oil fields in northern Iraq account for about 20% of Iraq's total proven reserves of crude oil. And there are foreign companies in there that are doing the exploration work and the extraction. And so Iraqi Kurdistan basically is open to investment by companies from all over the world, whether it's the U.S., whether it's Russia, whether it's China, or European companies, Japanese companies. They're all there. The interesting thing about the distribution side of it is that no oil company does retail distribution at least in Iraqi Kurdistan. So what happens is that each petrol station is a separate owner, and so each petrol station has a different name. There's no brand name for petrol stations. And so these individually owned petrol stations buy petroleum or buy gasoline or diesel from the refineries, either in Kirkuk or I think there's one in Mosul.
So are the prices vary a lot?
It's very uniform. We're talking about the fuel prices are very uniform. Yes.
Last question. How long do you think Iraq will allow these Mosul and Kirkuk oil revenues to be taken by the Kurds? Is that going to be, they're just happy with that, or they're happy to have...
Well, they're not happy with it. So the question is how long do I think that the government in Baghdad will allow the Kurds to extract the crude oil, natural gas, and ship it out, directly from Iraqi Kurdistan without going through Baghdad. So what has happened is this: is that what the Iraqi government in Baghdad wanted was that all of the oil revenues would go through Baghdad, and that Baghdad would tax it, and then provide revenues to the provinces, including Iraqi Kurdistan. So what happened is that because Iraqi Kurdistan was exploiting the oil reserves directly, and then shipping it out to Turkey, right? Either Turkey, some of it goes to Iran. So one of the things that I saw, for example, if you go to the eastern side of Iraqi Kurdistan, is that you see this incredible number of oil tankers. So the highways sometimes are just lined with oil tankers, because from time to time when there's demand, or when sanctions allow, there's this massive shipment of petroleum and crude oil by tanker from Iraqi Kurdistan to Iran, or from Iraqi Kurdistan to Turkey. So this is happening, and because the Baghdad never got full control of the oil revenue stream. So what they did is, and I think this happened early in 2017, is that they decided to cut off the revenue distribution to the province, to Iraqi Kurdistan. They just cut it off and said, we're not going to give you any more money. So in a way, things are working out now in the sense that Iraqi Kurdistan taxes the oil revenue, and then uses that to run their government. So in a way, that what happened in 2017 brings Iraqi Kurdistan a step closer to de facto independence. Yeah.
I just wanted to remind you about
Oh, yes. So if there are no other questions, so we do have these evaluation sheets that we'd like you to fill out. So if you could pass those around. Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.